Next up, we're changing tack. We have heard a lot from businesses, from governments earlier today, even. We're going to take a bit of an artistic take. We're very pleased to have with us Ian Bailie, international production designer, supervising art director, who has also been nominated for an Oscar and BAFTA and for excellence in art direction by the Art Directors Guild of America. Ian now he has more than 30 years of experience in this field under his belt and has worked with some of the world's top sci-fi directors, including Ridley Scott. So Ian, welcome again. Thank you for taking time to join us. I understand.
My pleasure. Thank you very much for inviting me.
I understand you're in the middle of a massive production, so this is really precious, this time we have together.
Yeah, there's 2 or 3 things going on. Yes, indeed.
That's great. Now, well, we wanted to take a bit of inspiration. While our ideas can be inspired by commerce, we are often also inspired by the arts. So for you personally, Ian, briefly, what inspires you? Who are some people that you have worked with in the movie industry that have really inspired and moved you?
Well, I guess first person comes to mind is Roger Corman. Roger Corman is well known for not having lost a cent in the movie industry. And he made all those 1950s movies, the sci-fi movies, what were called B movies back in the day. Rob Bowman did the X-Files during the 90s. Also Ridley Scott, of course, Stanley Kubrick. Ken Adam was a great designer who designed the Bond franchise and Dr. Strangelove. So there's a whole plethora of film people. There's people outside the business as well who inspired me, but film people, those would be that. Tarkovsky as well, Russian director, fantastic sci-fi director too. So yeah, there's a whole plethora of people that one gets inspired by.
Well, what do you think is that red thread that connects them all? What makes them so inspiring to you?
They're visionaries. I think they don't stick to the norm. They're a little bit, they're more maverick. They're a little bit revolutionary. And they want to put across, I think, an image or an ideal or a future that a lot of us aspire to. And I think that's where the connection is. We all sort of have a connection with what they put on the screen, and that's why we like them.
It's true. Maybe it's that maverick dash of spice that they have that allows them precisely to be able to predict the future better than some commercial visionaries. So what immediately comes to mind, you have mentioned a few key names already. Now we know that flying cars made an appearance in the 1960s Jetsons, the Bond series, of course, in Chitty Chitty Bang Bang as well, the hologram table in George Lucas's Star Wars, and many others. Now, in fact, the technological singularity term was not coined first by a scientist or techie, but by Vernor Vinge, the science fiction author, all the way in 1983. So my question to you, Ian, really is, can you share with us some examples of sci-fi books and movies that have proved to be really accurate in their predictions of the future?
Well, comic strips. Let's start with comic strips. Dick Tracy. Dick Tracy, back in the 1940s, had a two-way watch where he could talk and take messages. Then by the 60s, he was watching videos and TV on it. And we now have the smartwatch, and that's, 50 years later. So that was a really, really revolutionary introduction to kids watching comics or reading comics back in the 40s and 60s. The Eagle Comics, which was a British publication in the 1950s, Dan Dare said that everybody would have a computer. And by the 1990s, he expected everybody to have connection or contact with the whole world. So that took about 30 years, 40 years for us to catch on to that. So comics have been a big indicator of where we might be going in the future. Iron Man. We now are making exoskeletons for people who have got broken limbs or have lost their limbs. Movie-wise, Total Recall, like you mentioned, self-driving cars, virtualifications. We see that in Total Recall as well, where he's taken to Mars, but all the time he's sitting on a chair. Minority Report, and we have touchscreen computers, automated cars, personalized ads. Tom Cruise is told when he's walking through a pedestrian area that he looks thirsty, he should have a Guinness. So there's also a bit of advertising there as well in the movie. And then, of course, Blade Runner. Blade Runner's airborne cars, huge digital billboards. And this was made in 1982. Ridley Scott directed that in 1982. And there's also a little sort of a little sort of suggestion of the PC world we live in now, because the replicants in Blade Runner, when they were killed, they weren't executed, they were retired. So there's a lot of movies. Space Odyssey, video phone, video interfaced computer. It took Siri 40 years to catch up with that in 2010, because, as you know, Space Odyssey was made in 1968. Terminator, unmanned drones, that was made in 1984. There's a huge plethora of movies that predict the future.
Accurately at that, right? And you'd be surprised. I mean, I guess the question running in all of our minds is, what is that secret sauce to them? You know, did they just have a crystal ball that was more accurate than the rest of us? Or is there a certain method to them being able to predict what's in the future? Is there something all of us could learn from them? I'm trying to extract the goodness from all the sci-fi creators there, comics, movies, and otherwise.
I don't know. I think the secret sauce is something that one is born with. It's that sort of searching for knowledge, being aware, being mindful of what's around us, and using that to predict where we might be going in the future. I think it's a case of looking at the natural world, looking at arts, history, of course, as well. History is a great provider of knowledge for the future, not just the present. So the secret sauce, I think, more importantly, it's a little bit like the talent that the universe gives us to start off with, and it's how we develop that, and how we share it, and how we pass it on to the next generation, you know?
You know, in a world that increasingly is very reliant on devices, some argue that these devices may limit our creativity and imagination. I'm sure you have something to say on that, Ian. How do people continue to stay creative, to continue to stretch the boundaries of our imagination?
I have, you know, as you can probably tell from my grey hair, I'm of a generation where I have a love-hate relationship with technology. I love the fact that I can do this right now with you. I love the fact that I'm away. I can speak to my family and my children. But I still love to open a book. I still love to draw by hand. I'm not just always on a tablet, on a computer. So the technology for me is I do have a love-hate relationship with it. Sometimes I wish it would just go away and leave me alone to meditate. Sometimes the chances to meditate now get less and less, because there's always noises and pings. I've been on several Zooms recently with directors and producers, and I get a call, and the call comes through my computer as well, which interrupts the Zoom. So technology is something that needs to be embraced, but it needs to be embraced in a mindful way so that it benefits us, and hopefully we use it to help the natural world rather than destroy it. You know, because the bottom line is, as good as technology is, we need to think about where we're going to be in 30, 40 years' time with the planet, not just with the technology.
Well, that's true. You know, I'm thinking this is quite a unique session from the ones that we've had before, where we were getting a lot of inspiration directly from business leaders. But I thought that we slotted you into the agenda because we think it's equally important to kind of take ourselves out from that single track mind sometimes, and really to be able to be inspired by other areas. So for the business leaders, very time-stressed people sitting, listening to you, what pieces of advice do you have, perhaps drawing from your own routine or from other business leaders that you have interacted with? What do they do to regularly stay connected with sources of insight and inspiration?
Sorry.
Almost like a ritual. You know, do you have a ritual to say that, hey, to ensure that much as we embrace technology, we're not kind of sucked into it, that we have time to step away and to be recharged, but also re-inspired?
I think, well, for me personally, I think you have to make that time. And I do use technology in my business, and it is very time consuming. It's very intense. It's quite stressful, just like any business. And I think it's really important to take yourself out of that moment and enjoy what's around you, the people that are around you, but more importantly, the natural world. I get great inspiration from art, from sculpture. And the thing is, technology is embracing all of these elements. It's just how we use it to not destroy it, but for us to benefit from it, but for the natural world and art to benefit from it as well. But I think standing back and just taking a moment to engage with ourselves and with the people around us, because we are all connected. And I think we should make sure that technology doesn't separate us, but actually brings us together or makes that bond stronger.
Interesting. Yeah, again, so people are probably going to think, how do I, again, learn from artists like yourselves, the best of artists, and apply it to their own commercial and corporate work? In fact, are there ways that we can learn from you to accelerate innovation or the adoption of innovation or to encourage people to overcome challenges when it comes to adopting technology? You know, there's a lot of fear, questions, doubts, but I'm sure in the arts as well, there are skeptics and there are fears and doubts, especially when you experiment with new things. So are there insights, transferable insights from your world to perhaps the business world?
I mean, I get my insights from many things outside of the film industry, and I'm sure many of the speakers and experts you've had on board, I would probably use some of them to get inspired by, because at the end of the day, you know, every morning you waking up, you want to learn something. You want to learn something that's beneficial to yourself, but also the people around you. So I don't know if there's a lot that I can teach other people outside the industry that, you know, that I go through. But what I do know is that I gotta stand back sometimes, and it's a little bit like, you know, you gotta stop sometimes and smell the roses. You gotta stop and see the, you know, you gotta see the wood, not just the trees. And I think it's very important that we do that in every sphere of life.
And that's true. It reminds me of a quote as well about let's make sure we're not walking through the forest and not seeing firewood. Well, you know, it's not very environmentally friendly to say that, but kind of really making sure, like you said, to see the big picture and not just being fixated on the immediate.
Yeah, and I think it's important as well to realize that we have five senses. It's to use all of them, you know, it's to use all of the senses. I mean, obviously in film we don't have smell yet. I'm sure at some stage we will have smell-o-vision, but to use all the senses is very important to make ourselves complete, to make ourselves whole.
And there's actually a great transferable wisdom there, because if you think about a lot of the technologies today, including robotic intelligence or mind-controlled wheelchair and technologies, a lot of that goes back to the five senses. How do we
Very much so.
enhance our sensory experience?
Very much so, and I think that's what the scientists, the experts are trying to put into those robotic elements, is so that I don't think it's a case of like Terminator, where they're going to take over the human race, but it's having some sort of compatibility so that we can work together.
Yeah, hopefully it's not a Skynet case. We haven't seen that so far, and if so, let's put in a kill switch somewhere.
Well, you know, and also in Space Odyssey, I mean, Hal's got suicidal tendencies. He wants to kill himself, you know. So, and then of course, when he wants to kill himself, he wants to take everybody with him, which is not something we want, you know.
No, we definitely don't want a suicidal, slightly psychopathic HAL 9000 or Skynet for that matter.
No.
But we can absolutely learn and marry technology in how we can enhance our five senses and be inspired by it. So really helping humans be more human, even with the help of technology and machines.
Oh, I think so. We've gone so far now we can't go back. So it's a case of making sure that we embrace it, that we actually that machines, technology, and the human race are compatible. But it is very important that compatibility extends to the natural world, because, you know, we're in a position now where we can stop the advanced decay of the natural world, and it's very important that the technology we use, which is part and parcel, you know, the debris from the technology we don't use anymore is part and parcel of some of the destruction in the natural world, and we've got to make sure that what we develop in the future, technology-wise, and this is for everybody, not just the people who are behind the computer technology, but we've got to find some way of disposing of it in a way that it doesn't destroy what we have left.
I think that's a really important point, because just earlier we were talking about sustainable cities, and you're reminding us again that even as we make advancements and inroads, let's remember to be sustainable and conserve our resources, perhaps even
so.
multiply them.
And everybody's got to be responsible. It's like being responsible for your own stuff, not just the stuff that's productive, but the stuff that you finished with. I mean, just recently I read, you know, China has been germinating melon seeds in space, and they now have these huge, delicious fruity melons that are huge. And if that's a sort of something new to use space, if you like, to defeat us instead of using the planet, that's a great way forward with technology.
Well, that certainly sounds like something that could come up of a sci-fi comic or novel
Absolutely.
or a movie, right?
Absolutely.
Like imagine
Absolutely.
growing melons in space
Yeah.
and
Well,
one day floating and eating them in space as well.
and everything else. I mean, I don't think we're going to see flying cows just yet. You know, the old adage of, pigs will fly. But maybe at some stage, maybe even our protein, or animal protein might be grown outside the planet. Who knows?
You never know exactly, and hopefully then the methane they contribute will no longer be trapped in our own in our own
Absolutely.
planet. Well, jokes
Absolutely.
aside, let's take a leaf, let's take a step, Ian, or for you to take a step at following the footsteps of some of your sci-fi predecessors. If you had a crystal ball for 2050, what is mobility gonna look like? Putting on your creative sci-fi glasses, what is mobility in 2050 going to look like?
Well, I do believe that we're going to have self-driving cars, and they're going to be directed from a central hub. Because of my generation, my age, the concept of that scares me because I like to be in control of my vehicle. But if that's dealt with, mindfully, I think that's definitely something that's going to happen in the future. There are going to be self-driving cars, just like in Total Recall, in Minority Report. I think bionic humans, with a manipulated DNA, is probably going to give us a longer life expectancy. As far as the look of the planet's concerned, I'm not entirely sure, but I think we are going to see, instead of seeing horizontal vapor trails from aircraft, we're probably going to see vertical ones from rockets taking off. Rockets taking off is becoming a much more regular occurrence now. And in fact, the latest rockets from China, I mean, those look beautiful. You look back at the old NASA rockets, which are big, bulky, quite sort of incongruous elements. But the Chinese rockets are beautiful. They must have been designed by a filmmaker, It's very. I would just like to think that the post-apocalyptic worlds that have been put into movies in the past. I hope that isn't our future. I hope our future is more like Gattaca. I hope it's more like Equals, which is a movie I did with Ridley Scott, which is quite a sort of sterile but very minimalist, beautiful environment that people can live in peacefully, but they're living with technology. So I think I think there's going to be a mixture. We're going to have a bit of rough with the smooth, I think, in the future.
Interesting. You know what, Ian? I don't think it's going to take 2050 for that to realize, because what you just mentioned, flying vehicles, bionic humans almost, or vertical aircraft, or flying cars taking off, we actually covered quite a bit of that in today's summit, and experts are saying that it could take place in the next 10 years or less. In fact, the vertical flying vehicles taking off possibly as soon as 2025 or 26 by a UK company, in fact, Vertical Aerospace. So really exciting stuff coming up.
That's exciting. Well, maybe by 2050, it'll just be commonplace then,
Every one of us will be a bionic human doing vertical takeoffs and landing, and probably live to 150 years old or more.
Oh, so I might still be here then.
I sure hope so. Well, thank you so much, Ian, for joining us once again. All the best with your current production efforts, and we look forward to seeing you around.
Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you, Ian.
All the best.